You will die in prison. 8-year-old boy sentenced to life for killing his mother. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The courtroom fell silent as Judge Morgan cleared his throat. 8-year-old Tommy Wilson sat motionless, his small legs dangling from the chair, not quite reaching the floor. His public defender, a woman he'd met only twice, placed her hand on his shoulder. Tommy didn't understand most of what had happened in this wood-paneled room over the past 3 weeks. He just knew it had something to do with his mom. In the case of State versus Thomas Wilson, this court has reached a verdict. Tommy's eyes darted around the room. Cameras clicked. People scribbled in notebooks. A lady in the back row was crying, though Tommy didn't recognize her. For the murder in the first degree of Sarah Wilson, this court sentences the defendant to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The words hung in the air for a moment before the courtroom erupted. Gasps, shouts, someone screamed. Tommy just stared at his hands, not fully comprehending what had been said. His lawyer bent down and whispered, "I'm sorry, Tommy, we'll appeal." Tommy looked up at her. "When can I go home?" Her face crumpled. "You can't, Tommy. That's what the sentence means. You'll be in a juvenile detention facility until you're 18, then transferred to state prison." Tommy's small voice was barely audible. "I'll die there?" She couldn't meet his eyes. "I'm so sorry." As the bailiff approached to take him away, Tommy finally broke. Tears streamed down his face as he began to wail, his small body shaking with sobs. "I want my mom. Please, I want my mom." Tommy Wilson's life operated on unspoken rules. Rules that governed every moment in the small blue house at the end of Maple Lane. Never invite friends over. Never answer the phone. Never ask about Dad. Never mention the locked basement door. That afternoon, Tommy returned from school to find his mother standing at the kitchen window watching the street. She didn't turn when he entered, just spoke in that quiet voice that somehow carried more weight than a shout. "Did anyone talk to you today?" "Just Mrs. Pearson, my teacher," Tommy replied, setting his backpack down carefully. "And Kenny at lunch." Sarah Wilson finally turned. Her face was pale, with dark circles under her eyes. At 34, she looked a decade older. Her blonde hair always pulled back severely, her clothes always plain and forgettable. What did Kenny want? The question sounded casual, but Tommy recognized the tension beneath it. "Just to trade cookies," Tommy said. "I didn't like you said." Sarah nodded approvingly. "Good boy, go wash up for dinner." The Wilson household functioned like clockwork. Dinner at 5:30 sharp, homework from 6:15 to 7, TV, only educational programs, from 7 to 7:30, bath at 7:45, bed by 8:15. During dinner, Sarah asked about school subjects but never about people. She checked his homework twice, marking errors in red. She watched him brush his teeth, making sure he counted to 60. Routines within routines. A life measured in minutes and rules. That night, something disrupted the pattern. Sarah received a text. Message during dinner. Something that never happened. Her hand trembled slightly as she read it, then she abruptly stood up. "Finish your dinner and put your plate in the sink," she instructed. "I need to check something." Tommy watched as his mother walked to the basement door, unlocked it with a key she kept on a chain around her neck and disappeared downstairs. He'd been told never to go down there. It was dangerous and not for children. In his 8 years, he'd never once seen what lay below. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Tommy finished his meatloaf and peas, carried his plate to the sink, and stood uncertainly in the kitchen. "Mom?" he called. No answer. He approached the basement door, slightly ajar now. He could hear his mother's voice, low and urgent, though he couldn't make out the words. She sounded afraid. Tommy hesitated, caught between curiosity and the ironclad rules that governed his existence. He pushed the door open just an inch more. A sliver of light revealed wooden stairs descending into darkness. "I did everything you asked," his mother's voice floated up. "I've kept my side of the deal for 8 years. A pause, as if she were listening to someone. But Tommy heard no other voice. "That wasn't the agreement," Sarah continued. "You said if I..." She fell silent suddenly. Tommy froze, wondering if she'd heard him. After a long moment, Sarah spoke again, her voice breaking. "Please, he's just a child." That night, unable to sleep, Tommy crept downstairs for a glass of water. He found his mother at the kitchen table, her hands busy with something. As he approached, she quickly covered the object with a cloth. "Tommy, go back to bed, now." But not before he glimpsed what she'd been holding. A gun, its metal gleaming in the dim light. The next morning, Tommy found a loose floorboard in his bedroom closet. Curious, he pried it up, revealing a small space beneath. Inside was a manila envelope. Inside the envelope was a photograph. A woman who looked like his mother but with longer hair and a genuine smile, standing beside a man whose face had been scratched out. Written on the back in faded ink were 3 words: "They're watching us." Michael Carter stared at his laptop screen, cigarette ash dangling precariously over his keyboard. At 52, he'd spent nearly 3 decades chasing stories that others ignored. The forgotten victims, the overlooked injustices, the inconvenient truths. His office at the Riverbrook Chronicle was more storage closet than workspace, walls covered with yellowing newspaper clippings and faded photographs. 20 years ago, he'd been on track for a Pulitzer. Now he wrote community pieces and obituaries, his ambition dulled by years of watching the guilty walk free and the innocent suffer. His editor called him cynical. Michael preferred realistic. The email that changed everything arrived at 2:17 a.m., sent from an anonymous account. They railroaded an 8-year-old boy. The Wilson case isn't what it seems. Look deeper. Michael almost deleted it. Anonymous tips were usually conspiracy theories or personal vendettas. But something about this one stuck with him. He pulled up the court transcripts from the Wilson trial. The case had been sensational. A child killing his mother. With her own gun. The youngest life without parole sentence in state history. The prosecution painted a picture of a disturbed child, angry at his mother's strict rules. The defense argued incompetence due to age, but never challenged the basic facts. The evidence seemed overwhelming. Tommy's fingerprints on the gun, gunshot residue on his hands, no signs of forced entry, and his own confession. Open and shut. Or was it? Michael scrolled through photos from the courtroom. One image snagged his attention. Tommy Wilson sitting at the defense table, his small face blank as he stared straight ahead. Not the face of a violent child, but something else. Something familiar. It was the same expression Michael had seen on victims of long-term abuse. A dissociation. A retreat. "Carter, where's that festival piece?" His editor's voice jolted him back to the present. "On your desk by noon," Michael replied without looking up. After his shift, Michael drove to the courthouse. The clerk, Doris, had known him for 15 years. "Those old Wilson case files? What for?" she asked, eyebrows raised. "Just tying up loose ends," he said with a practiced smile. "Something doesn't sit right." Doris hesitated. "That poor boy, terrible thing. You think he did it?" Michael asked carefully. She glanced around before lowering her voice. "Between us? I've seen a lot of killers in my 30 years here. That child didn't have the eyes." Hours later, in his cramped apartment, Michael spread the files across his kitchen table. Something wasn't adding up. The prosecution's timeline claimed Sarah Wilson was killed between 3:15 and 3:45 p.m., when Tommy would have just arrived home from school. The school bus driver confirmed dropping Tommy off at 3:20. According to the police report, a neighbor heard the gunshot at 3:30 p.m. and called 911. Officers arrived at 3:42 p.m. and found Tommy standing over his mother's body, the gun on the floor nearby. But as Michael reviewed the dispatch logs, he noticed something odd. The first 911 call was logged at 3:17 p.m., before Tommy even got off the school bus. But this call wasn't mentioned in any of the court documents. He reached for the transcript of Tommy's confession. The boy had allegedly said, "I was mad. She wouldn't let me go to Kenny's house. I got her gun and shot her." Simple, direct, damning. The confession of a child who didn't understand the gravity of his actions. Michael flipped to the officer's notes on the interrogation. Detective James Burrows had questioned Tommy alone for 40 minutes before recording began. No parent present, no lawyer, no child psychologist. Just a traumatized 8-year-old and a detective, under pressure to close a shocking case. Michael's phone rang, jarring him from his thoughts. An unlisted number. "Mr. Carter?" The voice was female, hushed. "I saw you at the courthouse today. You're looking into the Wilson case." "Who is this?" "Someone who was there. The confession. It wasn't what they said. That poor boy was fed every word." "I need to talk to you," Michael said, grabbing a pen. "They'll know if I'm seen with you," the woman whispered. "Check the officer's statement against the autopsy report, the bullet trajectory. It's impossible." The line went dead. Michael turned back to the files, searching for Detective Burrows' statement. According to the officer, Tommy had stood directly in front of his mother and fired the gun at chest height. But when Michael found the autopsy report, his blood ran cold. The bullet had entered Sarah Wilson's chest at a 40-degree downward angle, as if fired by someone much taller than an 8-year-old boy. Michael Carter knew that witnesses were the heartbeat of any investigation. Physical evidence told part of the story, but people, with their memories, fears, and secrets, filled in the gaps. The Wilson case had surprisingly few witness testimonies for such a high-profile murder. His first stop was Maple Lane, the quiet suburban street where Sarah and Tommy Wilson had lived. The Wilson house stood empty now, a for sale sign tilting in the overgrown yard. Yellow police tape still clung to one corner of the porch, forgotten or deliberately left as a warning. Next door lived Eleanor Simmons, 73, retired school librarian. According to court records, she had been the one who called 911 after hearing the gunshot. "I don't talk about that day," she said when Michael introduced himself. Her thin fingers clutched the doorframe. It was horrible enough living through it once. "Just 5 minutes," Michael pleaded. "Something's not right about this case." Eleanor glanced nervously up and down the street before reluctantly opening her door. Inside, family photos covered every surface, and the smell of baking hung in the air. "The Wilsons moved in 3 years ago," she began, hands fidgeting with her cardigan buttons. Kept to themselves, the boy was always so quiet, so polite, not like other children his age. "Did you ever see anyone visit them? Friends? Family?" Eleanor shook her head. "Never. That poor woman, always looking over her shoulder. I tried to be neighborly at first, brought over a casserole when they moved in. Sarah thanked me but didn't invite me inside. I could see in her eyes something wasn't right." "You called 911 that day. What exactly did you hear?" Eleanor's face clouded. "I was watering my roses. First I heard raised voices, a man and a woman arguing, then the gunshot." Michael's pen froze mid-word. "A man? This wasn't in your statement." The detective said I must have been confused, that there was no man, just the boy. Her voice dropped. "But I know what. Oh, I heard. I've lived alone since my Harold passed 15 years ago. I know the difference between a child's voice and a man's." Michael pressed further. "Did you ever see any men around the Wilson house? Repair workers? Delivery people?" Eleanor hesitated. "About a month before it happened, a man in a dark car parked across the street for hours. When Sarah came home from grocery shopping, she saw him and nearly dropped her bags. She hurried Tommy inside and locked the door. The car drove away soon after." "Did you tell the police?" "Of course. Detective Burrows said they'd look into it." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "They never did." Michael's next stop was Riverbrook Elementary, where Tommy had been a third-grade student. Most staff were reluctant to talk, citing privacy policies and ongoing legal issues. But Howard Jenkins, the janitor who had worked at the school for 30 years, was less constrained. "That Wilson boy was different," Howard said as he mopped the hallway floor. "Didn't play with others at recess. Always sat alone. Jumped at loud noises." "Signs of abuse?" Michael asked. Howard leaned on his mop. "Maybe, but he never had bruises or nothing like that. It was more, he was scared all the time, like a rabbit ready to bolt." "Did his mother ever come to school events?" "Every single one. Sat in the back, watched him like a hawk. Teacher tried to discuss Tommy joining the chess club once. Kid was smart as a whip. Ms. Wilson shut it down immediately." Said he needed to come straight home after school, no exceptions. Michael's final interview of the day was with Kenny Alvarez, the classmate Tommy had mentioned trading cookies with, the only friend the boy seemed to have. Kenny's mother hovered anxiously during the interview, but allowed her son to speak. The 10-year-old boy twisted his baseball cap in his hands. Tommy never talked much about home, Kenny said. One time I asked why he couldn't come to my birthday party, and he said his mom was afraid of him finding them. Him? Did Tommy say who? Kenny shook his head. Just him. I thought maybe his dad or something. Before leaving, Michael asked one last question. Kenny, did Tommy ever seem violent to you? Did he ever hurt anyone at school? Kenny looked genuinely confused. Tommy? No way. He wouldn't even kill spiders. When we found one in class, he made us put it outside, instead of squishing it. That evening, Michael typed up his notes at home. The official narrative was unraveling. A child with no history of violence, a mother living in fear, a mysterious man, a bullet trajectory that didn't match the prosecution's theory. His phone rang, another unlisted number. Mr. Carter, this is Patricia Delgado. I was Tommy's bus driver. I heard you've been asking questions. Yes, Listen carefully, she interrupted. I can't talk long. They told me not to speak to reporters, but I can't stay silent anymore. That day when I dropped Tommy off, there was a black SUV parked near their house. Tommy saw it and started shaking. He didn't want to get off the bus. Did you see who was in the vehicle? A man in sunglasses. I thought maybe it was his father or something, but Tommy was terrified. I had to walk him to his door. Sarah yanked him inside the moment. She saw him. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. This wasn't in your... I told the police everything. They left it out of my statement. The next day, my supervisor said if I mentioned the SUV again, I'd lose my job. I have 3 kids, Mr. Carter. I need this job. Patricia, this is crucial information. I have to go. They're watching my house. The line went dead. Michael tried calling back immediately, but there was no answer. The next morning, when he drove to Patricia Delgado's address, the neighbors told him she'd left town suddenly during the night. No forwarding. Address. No goodbye, just gone. The county records office was housed in a basement that smelled of old paper and failing dehumidifiers. Michael had spent so many hours there over the years that Gladys, the ancient clerk, kept a coffee mug with his name on it behind her desk. Birth certificates. This time? She asked, leading him through narrow aisles of filing cabinets. Sarah Wilson. Need to know who she was before Riverbrook. Gladys frowned. That poor woman with the little boy who, well, you know. An hour later, Michael stared at the documents spread before him. Pieces of a puzzle. That didn't fit together. Sarah Wilson had moved to Riverbrook 3 years ago, but before that she didn't seem to exist, at least not under that name. The trail led him to Cedar Rapids, Iowa, where Sarah had been Sarah Dalton. Before that, she was Sarah Marshall in Springfield, Missouri. And before that, Sarah Jenkins in Tucson, Arizona, a woman running, changing identities like clothing. In Tucson, Michael found the first solid lead, a hospital admission record from 10 years ago. Sarah Jenkins, 24, treated for multiple fractures, a concussion, and internal bleeding. The intake form listed the cause as fell downstairs, but a nurse had written in the margin, obvious domestic assault, patient refuses to name attacker, frightened. 2 weeks after that hospital visit, Sarah Jenkins disappeared from Tucson. A month later, Sarah Marshall appeared in Springfield. More troubling was what Michael discovered about Tommy's birth certificate. The document listed his father as Robert Wilson, but when Michael cross-referenced this name with marriage records, he found no evidence that Sarah had ever been married to anyone with that name. In fact, there was no record of Robert Wilson connected to Sarah in any of the cities where she'd lived. At the Riverbrook courthouse, Michael requested Tommy's school registration documents. The emergency contact form listed only Sarah, with no secondary contacts. Under father's name, Sarah had written, deceased. But the most startling discovery came when Michael obtained a copy of Tommy's original birth certificate from Arizona. Under father, a different name appeared, James Mercer. Michael ran the name through criminal databases. James Mercer had a record: domestic violence, aggravated assault, harassment, all charges. Eventually dropped when victims refused to testify. The last known address was in Phoenix, less than 30 miles from where Sarah had lived in Tucson. There were no recent records for James Mercer, no death certificate, no current address, no employment history for the past 7 years. It was as if he had vanished or deliberately gone off the grid. That night, Michael drove back to the Wilson house. The empty building stood dark against the twilight sky, windows like empty eyes. Using the flashlight on his phone, he examined the perimeter. At the back door, he noticed something odd. Scratch. Marks around the lock, as if someone had tried to force entry. According to the police report, there had been no signs of forced entry. Another discrepancy. As he turned to leave, his foot hit something partially buried in the flower bed. He knelt down and brushed away soil to reveal a small metal object, a cufflink with the initials JM. James Mercer had been here, but was he here the day Sarah Wilson died? The morning headline of the Riverbrook Chronicle read, "Local journalist questions Wilson verdict. Evidence doesn't add up." It wasn't the front page. That space was reserved for the upcoming county fair. But it was something. Michael had convinced his editor to run a small piece outlining the inconsistencies in the case. By noon, Michael's desk phone was ringing. "Carter," he answered, coffee mug in hand. "My office. Now." His editor's voice was tight, controlled. In the Todder, glass-walled office, Richard Simmons, editor-in-chief for 15 years, looked like he hadn't slept. "What the hell were you thinking?" "I was thinking about journalism," Michael replied. "You know that thing we're supposed to do?" Richard slid a sheet of paper across the desk. It was a letter on, county prosecutor letterhead, threatening legal action against the newspaper for irresponsible reporting that undermines public trust in the justice system. The prosecutor's office called. The mayor called. Hell, even Judge Morgan called. "They're scared," Michael said, "which means I'm on to something. They're powerful, which means we're in trouble." Richard rubbed his temples. "I'm pulling you off this story. Effective immediately." "You can't be serious." "Look, Michael, I've backed you for years. But this is different. There are forces at work here that—" He stopped abruptly. "Just drop it, please." Michael left the building with his personal belongings in a cardboard box. 27 years at the Chronicle ended over a 500-word article questioning a conviction that should never have happened. The next morning, Michael's apartment door had been forced open. Nothing obvious was missing, but his files were scattered. His laptop screen shattered. On the bathroom mirror, written in what looked like lipstick, "Drop it." Instead of intimidating him, the break-in fueled Michael's determination. He drove to a motel on the outskirts of town, paid cash for a week, and set up a makeshift office. On the way, he bought a prepaid phone and a new notebook. His first call was to an old contact in the police department, a records clerk named Vince who owed him a favor. "The Wilson case file? Are you trying to get me fired?" Vince whispered. "Just tell me if anything unusual happened during the investigation." A long pause. "This isn't going on record, right?" "Off the record, Scout's honor." Vince sighed. There was a jurisdictional dispute. The state police tried to take over the case, but Chief Reynolds refused to hand it off. Then the DA's office got involved directly, which never happens with regular homicides. Everyone was acting strange, like there was some kind of pressure from above. Michael spent the afternoon calling former sources, collecting rumors, following breadcrumbs. One name kept appearing: State Senator William Grant, who had publicly praised the swift justice in the Wilson case and used it to push for tougher juvenile crime legislation. That evening, as Michael returned to his motel from the vending machine, a black sedan pulled into the parking lot. A man in a suit stepped out, his face shadowed. "Mr. Carter, a word." Michael tensed, candy bars clutched in his hand like weapons. "Who are you?" "Someone who thinks you should reconsider your recent activities." The man's voice was smooth, practiced. "The Wilson case is closed. For good reasons." "What reasons?" The man stepped closer. "You're a smart guy, you must understand there are situations where the greater good outweighs individual concerns. An innocent kid is serving life in prison. What greater good justifies that? A thin smile. You don't know what you're dealing with. People much more important than you have ensured this case stays closed. If you continue, you won't just lose your job, you'll lose everything. As the man turned to leave, he paused. You know who I work for, Mr. Carter. You don't want him as an enemy. Michael did know. The man's lapel pin, small, gold, distinctive, belonged to staffers in the state attorney general's office. You know what? Michael called after him. You just convinced me I'm on the right track. The man turned, his expression hardening. You have no idea who you're messing with. The Riverbrook Juvenile Detention Center looked more like a school than a prison, except for the razor wire topping the perimeter fence. Michael sat in the visitation room, a space designed to appear friendly with its bright yellow walls and child-sized furniture, but the security cameras in each corner told the real story. Getting this visit had taken 2 weeks of persistent calls, rejection letters, and, finally, a favor from a judge who still believed in journalistic integrity. Michael was listed as extended family, a lie that made him uncomfortable but seemed justified given the circumstances. The door opened, and Tommy Wilson shuffled in, escorted by a female guard. At 8.5, he seemed both older and younger than his years, his face gaunt, his eyes ancient, his small body swimming in the standard-issue gray sweatshirt. His movements were cautious, like an animal expecting a trap. Hello, Tommy, Michael said gently. My name is Michael Carter. I'm a reporter. Tommy said nothing, sliding into the chair across the table. His hands folded neatly showed bitten nails and a rash on one wrist where the restraints had been. I'm looking into what happened to your mom, Michael continued. I don't think things happened the way the police said. A flicker of something, surprise, hope, fear, crossed Tommy's face before disappearing. He remained silent. Can you tell me about that day? When your mom… Michael hesitated, unsure how to phrase it to a child. They said I killed her, Tommy replied, his voice soft and flat. With her gun. Did you? Tommy's eyes fixed on Michael's, searching for something. They said I did. That's not what I asked, Michael pressed gently. I asked if you did it. Tears welled in Tommy's eyes but didn't fall. I don't remember. Everything was loud and scary. There was blood. Mom was on the floor. The police came in, shouting. Michael slid a notepad and pencil across the table. Could you draw what you do remember? Sometimes that helps. Tommy hesitated, then picked up the pencil. His small hand moved with surprising precision, sketching the outline of a house, a stick figure of a woman on the floor, and a looming shadow in a doorway. Is this the man you saw? Michael asked, pointing to the shadow figure. Tommy froze, pencil hovering over the paper. He glanced nervously at the security camera. They said there wasn't any man. They said I made it up. I believe you saw someone, Michael said firmly. Was it someone you knew? Tommy didn't answer directly. Instead, he drew a series of symbols at the bottom of the page, circles and lines arranged in a pattern that seemed deliberate but incomprehensible. What are these? Michael asked. Mom taught me. It's our secret code, Tommy whispered. For when it wasn't safe to talk. The guard stepped forward, signaling the end of their time. 5 minutes, Mr. Carter. Michael leaned closer. Tommy, did your mom ever mention someone named James Mercer? The change was immediate. Tommy's face drained of color. The pencil snapped in his grip. Don't say his name, he whispered almost inaudibly. He finds you if you say his name. Is he your father? Tommy's eyes darted to the door, the camera, the guard. His breathing quickened. It's okay, Michael assured him. You're safe here. A bitter smile twisted the boy's face, a jarringly adult expression. Nobody's safe from him, not even here. As the guard led Tommy away, the boy turned back. Mom said if anything happened to her, I should look under the third step. What third step? Michael called after him. But Tommy was already gone, the heavy door closing behind him. Michael sat in his car in the detention center parking lot, staring at Tommy's drawing. The symbols at the bottom seemed like random doodles, but Tommy had called it a code. Michael's hands shook as he pulled out his phone to photograph the paper. For the first time since beginning this investigation, he found himself crying for an 8-year-old boy imprisoned for a crime he didn't commit, for a mother who died trying to protect her son, and for a system so corrupt it would sacrifice a child to protect powerful men. The third step. But which staircase? In which house? Michael dried his eyes and started. The car. He had work to do. The Wilson house stood empty and forlorn under the moonlight. Michael knew breaking in was illegal, but so was framing an 8-year-old boy for murder. He justified the crime as he picked the lock on the back door, a skill learned from a locksmith he'd once interviewed for a story on burglaries. Inside, the house felt suspended in time, furniture draped in white sheets, dust gathering on countertops. In the kitchen, unwashed dishes still sat in the sink, a half-finished life interrupted by violence. Michael moved through the rooms methodically, searching for staircases. The main staircase led to the second floor, Tommy and Sarah's bedrooms. Michael counted the steps, 14. Nothing unusual about the third step. The basement stairs, 9 steps, concrete. Michael knelt at the third step from the bottom, running his fingers along the edges. Nothing. Where else? He stood in the center of the living room, thinking, what third step would Sarah mean? The porch. The front porch had 3 steps leading up to the door. Outside again, Michael examined the third step from the ground. It looked solid, but when he pressed the edge, he felt a slight give. Using his pocket knife, he pried up the wooden board. Underneath was a small hollow containing a waterproof case. Inside the case, a USB drive, wrapped in a note. Sarah's handwriting, neat but hurried. If I die, this is why. Show it to someone you trust, not the police. Back in his motel room, Michael plugged the drive into his laptop. It contained a single video file dated 3 weeks before Sarah's death. The video showed Sarah's face close to the camera, a hidden recording. She looked exhausted, terrified. My name is Sarah Jenkins, formerly Sarah Dalton, Marshall, and now Wilson. I've been running for 9 years from my ex-boyfriend, James Mercer. He's found us again. If you're watching this, I'm probably dead. She took a shaky breath. James is Tommy's biological father, but he doesn't know Tommy exists. I was 2 months pregnant when I fled. James was violent, controlling. He nearly killed me the night I left. Sarah explained how she'd been hiding, changing identities, moving whenever there were signs James might have tracked her down. 3 days ago, I saw his car outside Tommy's school. Yesterday, I received flowers with no card. Lilies, his signature. He's here in Riverbrook. I've contacted the police, but Sarah's laugh was bitter. James has friends in high places. His cousin is William Grant, the state senator. The local police told me to stop making trouble and suggested I was paranoid. Sarah leaned closer to the camera. If something happens to me, James will be responsible. Not Tommy. Never my son. James is dangerous, connected, and will do anything to protect his reputation. Please, whoever finds this, protect my boy. The video ended abruptly. Michael sat in stunned silence, the missing pieces finally falling into place. A woman in hiding. A violent ex with political connections. A convenient scapegoat and an 8-year-old boy. Michael copied the file to 3 separate drives, then emailed one to his personal account. Evidence this important needed backups. His phone rang, the burner he'd purchased after the break-in. Only 3 people had this number. Carter. Mr. Carter, this is Alicia Ramirez from Social Services. Her voice was hushed, urgent. We met during the Wilson trial. I can't talk long. What is it? I was Tommy's caseworker. There's something you should know. Tommy's police interview. It wasn't just unethical. It was illegal. I have the original recording. Michael's heart raced. The confession? It was coerced. Completely manufactured. Detective Burrows fed him every word, threatened him with foster care, told him his mom would want him to confess. Her voice cracked. It was the most disgusting thing I've ever witnessed. I reported it internally and was told to mind my own business. I need that recording. Tomorrow, Riverside Park, the bench near the duck pond, noon. She paused. Be careful, they're watching me. Before Michael could respond, the line went dead. He checked. The time, 11:30 p.m. 12 hours until he could get his hands on proof of Tommy's innocence. At 1:17 a.m., Michael's laptop pinged with a news alert from the Riverbrook police scanner. Residential fire reported at 742 Oak Street. Alicia Ramirez lived at 742 Oak Street. By the time Michael arrived, the house was engulfed in flames, fire trucks surrounding the inferno. A firefighter confirmed what Michael already feared: no survivors. The evidence had gone up in smoke. Or had it? Alicia Ramirez's funeral was small. A handful of colleagues, some family members flown in from Arizona, and Michael. Carter standing at the back, his presence drawing suspicious glances. The official cause of the fire: faulty wiring. The official ruling: accidental death. Michael knew better. The timing was too convenient, the stakes too high. Alicia had evidence that could have freed Tommy Wilson and implicated powerful people in a gross miscarriage of justice. As mourners dispersed, Michael approached Alicia's sister, Maria. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said quietly. Alicia was trying to help an innocent boy. Maria's eyes narrowed. "You're the reporter she mentioned." She glanced around nervously. "Walk with me." They strolled through the cemetery, autumn leaves crunching underfoot. "The police say it was an accident," Maria said bitterly. "But Alicia called me the night she died. She was scared, said she was doing the right thing even if it was dangerous. She told me if anything happened to her, I should check her cloud account." Maria handed Michael a slip of paper with a username and password. "She uploaded something the night she died. I don't know what it is, but she wanted it found." Back in his motel room, Michael logged into Alicia's cloud storage. There, uploaded at 11:52 p.m., the night of the fire, was an audio file titled simply "Truth." The recording began with Detective James Burrows' voice. "This is an informal conversation with Thomas Wilson, age 8, regarding the death of his mother, Sarah Wilson." What followed turned Michael's stomach. For 40 minutes, Burrows bullied, manipulated, and lied to a traumatized child. He told Tommy his mother would want him to tell the truth, with truth clearly meaning the story Burrows was constructing. When Tommy insisted a man had been in the house, Burrows called him a liar, threatened him with foster care, with mean people who hit kids, and told him he'd go to a special prison for bad children if he didn't cooperate. By the end, Tommy was sobbing, agreeing to whatever the detective said, clearly just wanting the ordeal to end. The recording confirmed what Michael had suspected. Tommy's confession was worthless, extracted through coercion and fear. But it also revealed something else. Throughout the interview, Tommy repeatedly mentioned the man with the ring who had argued with his mother. Burrows dismissed this as fantasy, but Tommy was consistent about specific details: a large gold ring with a red stone, the smell of cigarettes and cologne, the way the man called his mother Sadie instead of Sarah. Michael remembered the cufflink he'd found with the initials JM, James Mercer. The pieces were falling into place, forming a new theory of what had happened that day. Sarah Wilson, living in fear, constantly moving to escape her abusive ex. James Mercer, violent, connected, determined to find her. A confrontation in the house, a struggle, a gunshot, a convenient scapegoat in a traumatized 8-year-old boy. But if James Mercer had killed Sarah, why wasn't he in the picture now? Why allow his biological son to take the fall for his crime? Michael began researching James Mercer more deeply. The man had a violent history, but his record stopped abruptly 7 years ago. No arrests, no credit card usage, no tax filings. It was as if he had disappeared. A late-night call to an old contact at the FBI provided the answer. "James Mercer? That name's flagged in our system," the agent said. "He was allegedly killed in a boating accident in Lake Mead 7 years ago. Body never recovered." Allegedly. There were inconsistencies, but the case was closed quickly. Political pressure. From Senator Grant? A pause. "I didn't say that." Michael's mind raced. A man officially dead but potentially alive. A powerful political family. A child taking the fall for murder. He needed proof James Mercer was alive, and in Riverbrook the day Sarah Wilson died. But how do you find a ghost? The answer came from an unexpected source. As Michael scrolled through police reports from the day of the murder, he noticed something odd. A report of a stolen rental car, filed just hours after Sarah's death. The theft occurred less than a mile from the Wilson house. The rental company's records showed the car had been rented to a James Mitchell with a Nevada driver's license. The license photo, which Michael obtained through another contact, showed a man with a striking resemblance to Senator Grant. James Mercer hadn't died in that boating accident. He'd simply become someone else, perhaps with his powerful cousin's help. And now Michael needed to find him before he disappeared again. Courtroom 302 of the Riverbrook County Courthouse had witnessed countless trials over its 60-year history, but few as troubling as the State versus Thomas Wilson. Michael sat in the now empty room, trying to absorb the magnitude of the injustice that had occurred here. Through persistent research and carefully cultivated sources, Michael had managed to contact 7 of the 12 jurors who had convicted Tommy. 5 refused to speak to him, 1 threatened to call the police, but 2 agreed to meet, on condition of anonymity. Juror number 4 was a retired schoolteacher who had voted guilty, but harbored doubts ever since. They met at a diner 2 counties over. The evidence seemed so clear-cut, she said, stirring her coffee nervously. The boy's fingerprints on the gunshot residue, the confession, and the prosecutor kept emphasizing how the child showed no emotion, how that indicated sociopathic tendencies. Did the defense challenge any of this? She frowned. That's what always bothered me. The public defender barely cross-examined witnesses. He didn't bring in any experts on child psychology. It was like he was just going through the motions. What about the bullet trajectory? The fact it came from above, not from a child's height? Her eyes widened. That was never mentioned in court. Never. Juror number 9, a plumber who had initially voted not guilty before being convinced by others, was more blunt when they met in a hardware store parking lot. It was a railroad job, he said bitterly. We were rushed. The judge kept hurrying things along. The deliberation was a joke. The foreman made it clear we needed to send a message about juvenile violence. When I raised concerns, I was practically bullied. Did you feel pressured to convict? He nodded. The whole town wanted someone to pay. A child killer made for good headlines. Clean, simple. He looked away. I've regretted my vote every day since. These conversations confirmed Michael's suspicions, but he needed someone from inside the system. His breakthrough came from an unexpected source, Officer Diane Reynolds, a junior police officer who had been first on the scene at the Wilson house. They met at a park 50 miles from Riverbrook. Reynolds, still in uniform but off duty, kept scanning her surroundings as if expecting to be followed. I shouldn't be talking to you, she began, but I can't sleep anymore. What we did to that boy, it wasn't right. What did you see that day? When we arrived, Tommy was in shock, standing over his mother's body. There was a gun on the floor, but there were things that didn't add up. She took a deep breath. The back door was unlocked. There was a coffee cup with lipstick on the table, and another cup still warm. Sarah Wilson wasn't alone before she died. Did you include this in your report? Reynolds laughed bitterly. I tried. Detective Burrows took over the scene and told me to focus on securing the perimeter. My observations were omitted from the final report. Why would Burrows ignore potential evidence? Because the case was solved before we even started investigating. Her voice dropped. The chief got a call that night. I was in the next room and overheard. Someone high up wanted this wrapped up quickly, with the boy taking the fall. Do you know who called? She shook her head. But the next day, the chief told us the Wilson case was priority number 1, and that the DA's office is handling this personally. That never happens with regular homicides. Michael pressed further. What about the forensic evidence? Reynolds hesitated, then reached into her pocket. I made a copy of the original ballistics report. It disappeared from the file. She handed Michael a folded paper. Look at the gun analysis. The weapon was wiped clean. Then the boy's prints were added to it afterward. and the bullet removed from Sarah Wilson didn't match the gun found at the scene. Michael stared at the document, his hand shaking. This proves Tommy was framed. It proves the evidence was manipulated, Reynolds corrected. But by whom? And why? As Michael drove back to his motel, the implications were staggering. This wasn't just a botched investigation or a rush to judgment. This was a coordinated conspiracy involving the police department, the district attorney's office, and possibly higher powers, all to frame an 8-year-old boy for his mother's murder. The question that kept haunting him: what was so important about silencing Sarah Wilson that an innocent child had to pay the price? Michael Carter's apartment had been ransacked again. This time, the intruders didn't bother with subtlety. Drawers emptied onto the floor, mattress slashed, electronics smashed. A warning scrawled in red marker across his living room wall. Last chance. He stood in the doorway, surveying the destruction with a strange sense of calm. He'd expected this. That's why he'd moved all his important documents, all the evidence he'd gathered, to a storage unit registered under a different name. What the intruders didn't realize was that their escalating attempts at intimidation only confirmed he was on the right track. The closer he got to the truth, the more desperate they became. That evening, as Michael ate dinner at a truck stop diner off the interstate, his face appeared on the small TV mounted in the corner. The local news was running a story about disgraced journalist Michael Carter, now under investigation for obstruction of justice and witness tampering in relation to the Wilson murder case. The report quoted anonymous law enforcement sources, claiming Michael had fabricated evidence and harassed jurors. His reputation was being systematically destroyed. Back in his new motel room, his third move in 2 weeks, Michael spread his evidence across the bed. Photos, reports, witness statements, timelines. The pieces of a puzzle that revealed a disturbing picture. A conspiracy reaching from local police to state government, all to protect James Mercer and, by extension, the political career of his cousin, Senator William Grant. But why? What made Sarah Wilson so dangerous that her death had to be covered up at any cost? The answer had to be in the basement of the Wilson house, the place Sarah had kept locked, the place she went when she received that text message. Michael had searched there but found nothing except an empty storage space. Or was it empty? He remembered Tommy's drawing, the strange symbols at the bottom, the secret code Sarah had taught him. Michael pulled out the photo of the drawing. The symbols seemed like random circles and lines, but Tommy had said it was a code for when it wasn't safe to talk, a way to communicate without being understood by others. After hours of staring at the symbols, trying different decoding methods, Michael nearly gave up. Then a revelation. They weren't abstract symbols at all, but a child's simplified drawing of objects. A book, a jar, a star, a teddy bear. Objects that might be in a child's room. Michael drove back to the Wilson house, breaking in for a second time. He headed straight to Tommy's bedroom, searching for the items in the drawing. Under the bed, he found a teddy bear with a small tear in its back. Inside was a key. The key didn't fit any door in the house, but it did open a small lockbox hidden inside a star-patterned storage bin in Tommy's closet. Inside the box was a flash drive and a handwritten note in Sarah's neat script. "Tommy, if you're reading this, I'm so sorry. I tried to protect you from the truth, but now you need to know. The video shows what your father did. What Senator Grant helped cover up. It's why we've been running. I love you. Be brave. Mom." Michael plugged the flash drive into his laptop. The video showed a younger Sarah, secretly recording a conversation. James Mercer's voice threatening her. Senator Grant warning her to stay quiet about what you saw at the hunting lodge. Sarah, defiant, saying she could no longer live with the knowledge that 2 girls died while you all stood by and did nothing. The final piece clicked into place. Sarah Wilson hadn't been running just from an abusive ex. She'd been running because she had witnessed a crime involving powerful men, a crime they would do anything to keep hidden. As the video ended, Michael felt a strange mix of triumph and dread. He had the truth now, evidence that could free an innocent child and bring down corrupt officials. But possessing this truth made him more dangerous than ever to the people who had orchestrated this cover-up. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Turn on the news. The local channel was reporting breaking news. Michael Carter was now wanted by police for the suspected arson that killed social worker Alicia Ramirez. They were framing him, just as they had framed Tommy. But unlike Tommy, Michael wasn't an 8-year-old child. He knew exactly what he was up against, and he was ready to fight back. The only person who might know where to find Sarah Wilson's sister was Eleanor Simmons, the elderly neighbor who had called 911 the day of the murder. Michael approached her house after dark, hoping she would help despite the risk. "They're saying terrible things about you on the news," Eleanor said, reluctantly letting him in through the back door. "None of it's true," Michael replied. "I'm being set up because I'm getting close to the truth." Eleanor studied his face, then nodded slowly. "Sarah mentioned a sister once. Said they weren't speaking because the sister couldn't handle the truth. I think her name was Rebecca. Did Sarah say where she lived?" "No, but—" Eleanor hesitated. "After Sarah died, a woman came to the house at night. She looked like Sarah. Could have been her sister. She was crying, trying to get in, but the police had it sealed off. She left before they saw her." "When was this?" "The night after the murder. I saw her from my window." Eleanor's voice dropped. "She left something under the porch steps before she left. I never told the police." Michael's heart raced. "Is it still there?" "I retrieved it the next morning. Didn't seem right to leave it out in the rain." Eleanor disappeared into another room, returning with a waterproof envelope. "I've been keeping it safe, waiting for someone who really cared about finding the truth." Inside the envelope was a handwritten note with a phone number and the words, "If anything happens to me, call Rebecca Jenkins, 7555-3498. She knows everything." 2 hours later, Michael sat in a 24-hour diner off the highway, waiting. He'd called the number, briefly explained who he was and what he'd discovered. The woman on the other end had been silent for a long moment before saying, "Truck stop diner on Route 16. 1 hour, come alone." The door opened, letting in a blast of cold air. A woman in her mid-30s entered, her eyes scanning the nearly empty restaurant before settling on Michael. The resemblance to Sarah Wilson was unmistakable. Same delicate features, same wary eyes, though Rebecca's hair was darker and cut short. She slid into the booth across from him. "You have 2 minutes to convince me you're not working for them." Michael pushed his folder across the table. "Everything I've found that proves Tommy is innocent, that James Mercer killed Sarah, that powerful people covered it up." Rebecca flipped through the documents, her expression unreadable. "You've been busy. Your sister was trying to protect her son from a dangerous man. I'm trying to do the same. It wasn't just James she was afraid of," Rebecca said finally. "It was what he represented, the power behind him." "Senator Grant?" Rebecca nodded. "William Grant and James were inseparable growing up. When Sarah started dating James, she got pulled into their world. Parties at the hunting lodge, powerful men, lots of money changing hands. What did she witness there?" Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. 10 years ago, there was a party at the Grant family lodge. Sarah was there with James. 2 young women were brought in. Girls, really. Sarah said they looked drugged. She tried to help them, but James stopped her. The next day, news reported them missing. What happened to them? Sarah never knew for sure, but she overheard conversations. Grant and James talking about handling the situation. A week later, the search for the girls was called off. Grant made a public statement about runaway teens and pushed legislation for harsher penalties on human trafficking, while privately joking about it. And Sarah ran. She was 3 months pregnant. Terrified, she knew too much. Rebecca wiped her eyes. "I helped her disappear, new name, new identity. But James was obsessed with finding her, and Grant had the resources to help him." "Did Sarah contact you recently?" 2 months before she died. She said James had found them again. Rebecca's voice broke. "She sent me something for safekeeping. Said it was her insurance policy. If anything happened to her, I was supposed to take it to the FBI, not local authorities." "What was it?" Rebecca reached into her bag and pulled out a sealed envelope. Evidence she'd been gathering for years. Bank records showing money transfers from Grant to families of missing girls, photos from the hunting lodge, A recorded conversation between James and Grant discussing how to handle Sarah if she ever resurfaced. Michael's hands trembled as he took the envelope. This is enough to reopen Tommy's case, to bring down Grant and Mercer. Be careful, Rebecca warned. These men have destroyed everyone who's crossed them. Sarah tried to protect Tommy by keeping him ignorant of his father's identity. When James finally tracked them down, he must have realized Tommy was his son. Instead of killing the boy too, they found a more elegant solution. Let the child take the fall. As they parted, Rebecca handed Michael a small silver locket. This was Sarah's. She'd want Tommy to have it when he's free. There's a picture inside. Sarah with Tommy as a baby. The only photo of them together that James never saw. Michael held the locket, carefully, feeling its weight, the physical embodiment of a mother's love and sacrifice. I'll make sure he gets it, Michael promised, and I'll make sure the world knows what really happened to Sarah Wilson. What neither of them noticed was the black sedan parked across the street, its driver speaking quietly into a phone. He's met with the sister. She gave him something. We need to move now. The first threatening call came at 3:17 a.m., waking Michael from a restless sleep in yet another motel room. We know you met with Rebecca Jenkins, the voice said without preamble. Return what? She gave you, and this ends now. Michael said nothing, his heart hammering in his chest. You have until noon tomorrow, the voice continued. The dumpster behind Wilson's Market. Leave everything, all copies, all evidence. Walk away and you live. Simple. The line went dead before Michael could respond. He immediately checked the window. The curtains were drawn, but he could see headlights in the parking lot, a car idling directly in front of his room. They were watching him. They knew exactly where he was. Michael gathered his belongings in under 2 minutes. The evidence from Rebecca, the most damning proof yet against Senator Grant and James Mercer, was tucked inside his jacket. He slipped out the bathroom window and cut through the woods behind the motel, emerging on a parallel road where he called a taxi to the bus station. By dawn, he was 50 miles away in a different town, using a prepaid credit card to check into a small inn under a false name. The clerk barely glanced at him. Just another traveling salesman passing through. In his new room, Michael spread everything on the bed. All the evidence he'd gathered about Tommy's case, about Sarah's murder, about the corruption that reached from the local police department to the state capitol. The story was clear now, but proving it would be another matter. The people he was up against had already demonstrated they would kill to keep their secrets. His phone rang again, his regular cell phone, not the burner. The display showed his editor's name. Richard? Michael, where are you? Richard's voice was strained. The police were here looking for you. They're saying you tampered with evidence that you've been harassing witnesses in the Wilson case. It's all lies. They're trying to stop me from— Listen to me, Richard interrupted. This is bigger than you realize. Men in suits, not local police, were asking questions about your research, your sources. They took your computer, your files, everything. FBI? No identification. But they had that look, government, but not the kind that shows. Badges. Richard paused. Michael, one of them said if I helped them find you, the paper wouldn't face obstruction charges. They're serious about shutting you down. I'm close to the truth, Richard. Sarah Wilson witnessed something at Senator Grant's hunting lodge, something involving missing girls. Grant and his cousin James Mercer silenced her, then framed her 8-year-old son for the murder. Jesus, Richard's voice dropped. You have proof? Enough to reopen the case, enough to start an investigation that Grant can't control. Be careful. These people— A sudden commotion in the background, muffled voices. I have to go. They're back. Michael, whatever you do, don't— The line went dead. Michael tried calling back, but there was no answer. Minutes later, his phone buzzed with a text from Richard's number. Don't call again. They're listening. Do what you have to do. Darkness fell. Michael noticed a black SUV driving slowly past the inn. Then again, 10 minutes later. They were searching for him, methodically checking every hotel and motel in the area. It was only a matter of time before they found him. With shaking hands, Michael opened his laptop and began transferring all his evidence. scanned documents, audio recordings, photos, notes, to an encrypted cloud account. Then he recorded a video, speaking directly to the camera, laying out everything he had discovered about the Wilson case, the frame-up of Tommy, the involvement of James Mercer and Senator Grant. "If you're watching this," he concluded, "it means something has happened to me. Everything I've said is supported by evidence I've uploaded to secure locations. The truth about Sarah Wilson's murder and the framing of her 8-year-old son cannot be buried any longer." He sent the video and access information to 5 trusted colleagues across the country, journalists he'd worked with over the years, who wouldn't back down from a story, even a dangerous one. He included Rebecca Jenkins's contact information and everything he'd learned from her. As he finished the last email, the inside parking lot filled with the harsh glare of headlights. Car doors slammed. Footsteps approached. Michael slipped the locket, Sarah's gift for Tommy, into his pocket. Whatever happened next, he would make sure it reached the boy. Someone knocked on his door. "Mr. Carter, we'd like to talk to you about Senator Grant." The man who entered Michael's motel room wasn't wearing a police uniform or a government suit. His expensive leather jacket and designer jeans spoke of money, not authority. His face had the weathered handsomeness of someone who had once been striking but had lived hard. A heavy gold ring with a red stone adorned his right hand. "James Mercer," Michael said, recognizing him from the driver's license photo. The man smiled thinly. "These days it's James Mitchell, but you already know that." He glanced around the shabby room. "Not exactly the Ritz, is it? Mind if I sit?" Without waiting for an answer, he took the room's only chair, crossing one leg over the other with casual confidence. 2 men remained outside the door, large, expressionless, clearly armed. "You've been causing quite a stir, Mr. Carter. My cousin is particularly concerned about your investigation." "Senator Grant should be concerned," Michael replied, standing his ground. "I know what happened to Sarah. I know about the hunting lodge, the missing girls, the cover-up." Mercer's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "Allegations without proof. The rantings of a discredited journalist. Who would believe you? I have proof. Sarah kept records, recordings, photos, bank transfers, all safely distributed to people who will know what to do with them if anything happens to me." For the first time, uncertainty crossed Mercer's face. "Sarah was always thorough." "She knew you'd find her eventually," Michael said. "She prepared." Mercer stood up, walking to the window. "You know, I loved her once, really loved her. She was different from other women, smarter, more perceptive. That was the problem. The problem was, you were involved in something terrible and she knew it. Politics is a dirty business, Mr. Carter. My cousin has ambitions beyond a state Senate seat. The men who support him, who fund him, they expect certain accommodations. Sarah didn't understand the realities of power. She understood right from wrong." Mercer turned, his face hardening. "A luxury most people can't afford. Do you think I wanted to hurt her, to track her for years? She left me without a word, pregnant with my child. A child she never told me about. You would have been a wonderful father," Michael said sarcastically. "Is that why you let Tommy take the fall for your crime? Fatherly love?" "That was unfortunate, not my decision. By the time I realized the boy was mine, things were already in motion. The police, the prosecutor, they had their narrative." Mercer's voice softened. "I would have stopped it if I could." "You're lying. You helped frame an 8-year-old boy, your own son, for murder. You're a monster." Mercer's face twisted with sudden rage. "You know nothing about what I've had to do, the choices I've had to make." He took a deep breath, composing himself. "It doesn't matter now. The boy is where he needs to be. Safe. Contained. In a few years, when he's older, arrangements can be made. Better juvenile facilities. Maybe early release when he's an adult, with the right behavior. He's innocent." "Innocence is relative," Mercer said coldly. "My cousin will be announcing his candidacy for governor next month. In a few years, who knows? The White House isn't out of reach. Nothing can interfere with that timeline, nothing." "So what happens now?" Michael asked, eyeing the door. "Your men shoot me? Another tragic accident?" Mercer laughed. "So dramatic. No, Mr. Carter, you're going to give me everything you, Have you the original evidence Sarah gave her sister? All your research, every copy. Then you're going to leave town. Start fresh somewhere far away. A generous bank account will appear in your name. Consider it a retirement package. And if I refuse? Then things become unpleasant. Not for you. At least not only for you. Your ex-wife in Seattle. Your mother in the nursing home in Florida. Your former editor, Rebecca Jenkins. The boy, Tommy. Accidents happen every day, Mr. Carter. Terrible, random accidents. Michael felt cold fear grip his spine. They had researched him thoroughly. They knew exactly where to apply pressure. Even if I gave you everything, how would you know there aren't other copies? Other people who know? Mercer smiled, a predator's smile. That's the beauty of it. We won't know. You'll have to live every day wondering if we're watching, if we suspect you've hidden something. You'll look over your shoulder for the rest of your life. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. But who's going to believe you now, anyway? A discredited, disgraced journalist with a vendetta against the justice system. A man wanted for questioning in an arson. Investigation? A conspiracy theorist harassing a respected state senator? Michael met his gaze steadily. People will believe the truth. Mercer's smile widened. Mr. Carter, if there's one thing I've learned in politics, it's that the truth is whatever those in power say it is. 6 months after his confrontation with James Mercer, Michael Carter sat alone in a small apartment in Seattle, watching the news unfold on his laptop. His beard was longer now, his hair flecked with more gray. The bags under his eyes spoke of sleepless nights and constant vigilance. The headline scrolled across the screen: Bombshell Revelations Rock State Politics. Senator Grant linked to corruption cover-up. The story had broken not through Michael's efforts, but through an unexpected source. An FBI investigation into human trafficking that had uncovered financial links to the hunting lodge owned by the E. Grant family. Sealed indictments had been opened. Arrests were being made. Senator Grant's office had issued a terse no comment before he abruptly canceled all public appearances. Michael's phone rang, a secure line he used only for his most trusted contacts. Carter, he answered. It's happening, said the voice of Amelia Zhang, an investigative reporter for the Washington Post and one of the 5 journalists Michael had sent his evidence to months earlier. Grant's been called to testify before a grand jury. His chief of staff just cut a deal with prosecutors. The house of cards is falling. What about Mercer? Still in the wind, but they'll find him. Too many people talking now, trying to save themselves. Michael closed his eyes, relief washing over him. And Tommy? Any movement on his case? That's why I'm calling. The DA's office is reopening the investigation into Sarah Wilson's murder. With Grant under federal investigation and new evidence coming to light, they're suddenly very interested in ensuring justice was properly served. After hanging up, Michael opened his safe and removed the silver locket that Sarah Wilson had meant for her son. He'd kept it. Close, a reminder of his promise. Now, perhaps, he could finally fulfill it. 2 weeks later, Michael sat in a sterile conference room at the Riverbrook Juvenile Detention Center. The door opened, and Tommy Wilson entered. Taller now, thinner, his eyes older than any 9-year-old's should be. Hello, Tommy, Michael said gently. Do you remember me? Tommy nodded. The reporter who asked about the code. His voice was flat, emotionless, a child who had learned to hide his feelings to survive. I brought you something. From your mom. Michael placed the locket on the table. Tommy stared at it, not reaching out. Is she really dead? The question knocked the breath from Michael's lungs. Yes, I'm sorry. Sometimes I think maybe she's just hiding again. That she'll come get me when it's safe. A single tear slid down Tommy's cheek. But she's not coming, is she? No, but the truth about what happened to her is finally coming out. People are listening now. The judge is reviewing your case. Tommy finally reached for the locket, opening it to reveal the photo inside. Sarah, younger and smiling, holding a baby Tommy. Will they let me go home? I think so, Michael said, though. He knew home no longer existed for the boy. Rebecca Jenkins had already volunteered to take custody of her nephew once his conviction was overturned. What about him? The man with the ring? They're looking for him. He won't hurt anyone else. Tommy closed the locket, clutching it tightly. He was my father, wasn't he? I heard Mom talking on the phone once. She said his father, and she meant him. Yes, Michael admitted, but that doesn't matter. What matters is that you're innocent. You always were. 3 days later, the headlines told the story. Child's murder conviction under review amid corruption scandal. Public opinion, once solidly against the child killer, had shifted dramatically as details of the frame-up emerged. Protests formed outside the juvenile detention center. Social media campaigns demanded Tommy's immediate release, but the justice system moved. Slowly, even in the face of overwhelming evidence. Legal procedures had to be followed. Appeals filed. Hearings scheduled. While Tommy waited behind bars, Senator Grant held a press conference announcing his resignation to focus on his family during this difficult time. He denied all wrongdoing, blaming overzealous prosecutors and media sensationalism. That night, James Mercer was spotted boarding a private plane to a country with no extradition treaty. He escaped before federal agents could arrest him. 2 months later, in a quiet courtroom with little fanfare, a judge finally overturned Tommy Wilson's conviction, citing substantial new evidence and grievous misconduct by investigating officers. After serving nearly a year for a crime he didn't commit, Tommy Wilson was free. But freedom came with a price. The psychological damage of imprisonment, the trauma of his mother's death, the knowledge that the man responsible, his own father, had escaped justice. Michael watched from a distance as Tommy left the courthouse with Rebecca, surrounded by reporters shouting questions. The boy kept his head down, his face expressionless. He had learned early that the world was not safe, that truth was malleable in the hands of the powerful, that justice was a word adults used but rarely delivered. In his final article about the case published in The New Yorker, Michael wrote, "Lies can condemn, but sometimes the truth only serves to wound. Justice is a beautiful word, but in Tommy Wilson's case, it never entered the room. A system that could sacrifice a child to protect powerful men is broken beyond simple repair. The guilty may eventually fall, but they cannot give back what they took from an 8-year-old boy. His childhood, his mother, his faith in a world where right prevails." 3 years later, an 11-year-old Tommy Wilson sits silently in his therapy session, staring at the camera that records each meeting for his ongoing treatment. He rarely speaks about his time in detention, about his mother, about the man with the ring who was his father. The therapist asks gentle questions. Tommy answers in monosyllables or not at all, but his eyes, those eyes that have seen too much, tell a different story. They speak of a child who understands what most adults never learn, that power corrupts, that systems fail, that truth is precious but easily buried. They are the eyes of someone who knows that some stories never really end, even when the last chapter is written.